What happens if you sharpen the blades of your CPU fan? Without any modifications, a piece of paper will simply get bent at most by a spinning fan. However, I'm curious what will happen if we push this to an extreme. And so, let's file down the tips of these fan blades to make them extra sharp. This is probably a good time to say, please don't try this one at home, because as you'll see in a moment, now that our blades are sharpened, the piece of paper is cut instantly when inserted into the fan. Talk about some clean cuts. This is definitely an unnecessary hazard, but really cool. Whoa. You guys are telling me you don't cut things open with your RAM sticks? Tell me then, why else would they perfectly fit inside of a knife holder and be able to so seamlessly slice a blueberry? Testing thermal paste patterns. Valentine's Day heart versus Super Bowl football. Increasing the stick of RAM's height every single day until it stops working. Day 1. And in fact, let's fast forward the boring parts and jump right into a double-decker RAM riser situation. At this point, our stick of RAM is over twice the size its original height, and if we install it into our computer and power it on, we can see that it still works, and is recognized at the correct frequency. So far, so good. Check back tomorrow for riser number 3. Another day, another riser. How many more of these can we add onto this stick of RAM before it stops working? Well, spoiler alert, that number is more than 3, because the trio worked perfectly fine together. However, if we add another to increase our total to 4, and we plug that monstrosity into our computer and power it on, you can see that it still powers through. This thing is climbing and climbing, and tomorrow we'll add some more. Adding even more risers to this stick of RAM until it stops working. We are now 5 adapters tall, and I finally figured out the use case of having this tall of a RAM stick. This great wall of RAM provides the computer with a whole new layer of protection against projectiles like these thermal paste paintballs. While that's nice and all, does this computer still work? Somehow, yes, although it's getting more and more difficult to turn on. Regardless of how many more it takes, tomorrow we'll finish this. Welcome back to adding a riser to this stick of RAM every single day until it stops working. Up to this point, we have increased this RAM's height by a factor of 5, and today we'll make it 6. As we install this absolute giant into our motherboard and power on the system, we see that we have reached the end of our journey. The system no longer boots. Now, don't be sad that it ended, be happy that it happened. And to help with any remorsing, I did just release a full YouTube video where I go through and I benchmark each incremental step throughout this process. Sometimes the best journeys in life are short and sweet. There once was a stick of RAM born too short and was constantly denied access into the motherboard by its older and taller brother. As you can imagine, this made the RAM very sad. Worry not, for it's time for another episode of Ridiculous PC Accessories, and today's accessory is bound to help our friend here. This here is a RAM riser, and as its name suggests, this adapter allows you to extend the height of your RAM. And just like that, it looks like there's a new boss in town. If you're anything like me, then you woke up with some shampoo all over your CPU, so this is how I cleaned it up. To begin, I drew a nice warm bath for the processor to soak in and gave it a professional massage. With all of the experiments that we put this thing through, it definitely deserves some pampering. Now that the shampoo is washed off, we can conclude this spa treatment with a nice rinse of isopropyl L. Once this dries, it'll be ready for the next experiment. What should we try next? What happens if you use shampoo instead of thermal paste on your PC? The result honestly blew me away, so you might want to stick around. With our shampoo nice and applied, we can measure the temperature of the CPU with this top line graph. And under load, we see a small uptick, but then a stagnant line. The temperature just doesn't increase from here. I honestly had to run this test like 3 times to confirm that this is indeed 10 degrees colder than if you just use thermal paste in the same setup. Granted, this is short-term testing, but it's just insane you can get this type of cooling with such a random liquid. What happens if you remove the main storage device from a running computer? As you'll see at the end of this video, please don't try this one at home. Removing the SATA and power connector from this SSD doesn't immediately shut down the computer. The game in the background eventually freezes, but we can still freely move the mouse. The screen then black screens, but again, we can still move the mouse around. At least, until we get the blue screen to death. From here, the computer automatically launches the motherboard's BIOS. Plugging the SSD back into our system reveals some more problems. The storage device now needs to be repaired in order to work properly. Please don't risk this one at home. What should we try next? Ever wonder what's inside an AMD socket? Well, if you pull out the lever that locks the CPU into place, and if you carefully pry off the socket cover, you can